Have you ever wondered how collaboration among churches can create powerful outreach opportunities? On this episode of Student Ministry Connection, I'm talking with Dan Lynch about his faith journey and about his experience guiding over 50 churches that collaborate every year for camp. Let's get ready to connect and grow. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection, a podcast for student ministry leaders who want to connect and grow. My name is Steve Cullum, and as I've said in other episodes, I love when the church comes together as one body. I got to experience this myself when I was in high school and throughout my time leading in student ministry. It's been something that I've always strived for. Sometimes it's harder than others, but when it works, it's beautiful. I mean, Jesus prayed for us to be unified in John 17, and when we are, wow. Today, we have a special treat for you as I sit down with my friend Dan Lynch to explore his incredible journey from middle school small group leader to youth pastor to the organizer behind Colorado winter camps. If you've ever wondered what it takes to create an impactful, large-scale youth retreat that brings together lots of churches, this episode is for you. Dan shares his firsthand experiences, the challenges faced, and the miraculous stories of transformation that happen at these camps. And you'll find out how an unexpected email sparked a friendship and a life-changing ministry adventure. I am so glad you're here. Let's jump right in. Well, Dan, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
It is great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we've known each other for what's it like? Almost. We're going on 8 years now.
I imagine so. Yeah. I mean, when was that first year that you guys jumped into the winter camp group?
Yeah, I think it was 2018. I think was our first year, and I remember you were one of the first emails I got at my brand new church email. It said, "Hey, my name's Dan Lynch, and we have this winter camp thing. Wanted to know if you were interested." And I remember going, "I don't know about this.
Who's this guy?"
Yeah. And we tried to do our own thing. And then it was like, I don't know, November. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to contact that Dan guy.
Well, that's great. Glad I could be a resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, those first few years, I remember I just sent out emails to churches all across Colorado, just like, hey, just wanted to introduce myself. And I think you might have been the only one to respond, so thanks.
Oh, well, yeah. Sorry it took me a while. I feel it out a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, we've gotten to know each other over those years, and that's cool. Now that you're not just some random guy that emails me, we actually hang out in person. You're one of the few guests that I've been able to do in person as well.
Well, that's great. Yeah, what an honor.
So yeah, for my sake, I'd love to dive into this, but also for our audience, we love just starting out with people's stories in order to connect with our guests more. So tell us what has God been doing in your life to get you to the point where you are today?
Yeah, for sure, man. I grew up in the church. My folks were believers, and they were great role models in my life growing up. And man, we were always at the church. I was an introverted kid, very introverted. Everywhere, like outside of the church, if I was at school or sports games, whatever it was, I was always a pretty introverted. I had a few friends, not a ton of friends, but except for in the church. Whenever I was at church, like I felt like these were just my people. These were just the people that I grew up with. Grew up in the same church. Knew all the people. It's like I had, 20 sets of grandparents and parents. And so like I knew people, I had a lot of friends there. And so it just seemed like we were always there doing something. If the church was open, we were there. And whether it was Awanas or the different church services that would go on. I remember growing up at church for our kids ministry, we did this thing called Caraway. I don't know if you've ever heard of Caraway. No, you've never heard of Caraway Street? Look it up, man. It's quite the image, but it's basically like kids ministry with this influence of Sesame Street. I think that's basically what it was. And so
Sounds fun.
So you would go to Caraway Street while the adults went and listened to the sermon, and it was kind of like Orange before Orange came around. It was just like, but they would teach you with puppets. They would bring these puppets in and teach you Bible stories, and basically pretty much any Bible story that I know right now. My first introduction to that Bible story was told by a puppet.
Nice.
And so I don't know if that's like traumatized me,
Explains so much.
Yes, that's probably now you know where I come from, but it's just like I remember growing up hearing the stories of the Bible and being very comfortable being at church and by the time I got to youth ministry, like, man, I'll tell you what, like that was so fun. I really enjoyed my youth ministry years. I was one of those kids that was always there. Like if there was an event, any sort of activity, like I'd be the first person to sign up, camp, overnighters. I was there every week for youth group. I'd try to invite as many people as I could, but again, I didn't know very many people outside of the church, so I was just like, I went and I would have just a blast. And I remember my youth pastor. Like my youth pastor was one of the guys that really helped shape and form me into who I am, because like this was a guy who devoted so much time and energy and into my life. And I can just remember like this guy was so humble, and he made the gospel, exciting and something that I wanted to learn about more. Like I said, I grew up knowing the gospel. I knew who Jesus was. I believe I had a relationship with Jesus, but it wasn't like really something that I was passionate about until like I really heard my youth pastor explain, who Jesus was. And he really reflected, Jesus a lot too. He was a lot of fun. I was kind of just a jerk to this guy. Like, I mean, as a middle school boy, I just remember all the stupid things that I would do. I remember at camp one time, we'd always try to pull pranks on our youth pastor, and it was a winter camp, and I took this guy's, our youth pastor's clothes out of his suitcase one night, and I put him in water, soaked them all, and then I set him outside, and they just froze solid. And so he gets up the next morning and go put on some clothes, and they're all outside. And he looked at me and he's like, "Who did this?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And he knew right away. And it was at that moment I was like, this guy's gonna throat punch me. Like I deserve it. And he didn't. Like, I mean, he was just, so humble. But I remember thinking like, man, youth ministry is something that I would like to do in my life. I would like to be a part of it for the long haul. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but because actually my goal in life, I was going to go into law enforcement. Actually, my dad is a police officer, and so I was going to follow in his footsteps. And so as soon as I turned 21, I went to the police academy, and was trying to get on a police force there. And I remember partway through the police academy, actually found out that I had skin cancer. I had melanoma. I had gone to the doctor a few weeks earlier for a checkup before I went into the police academy, and they called me a few weeks later and they're like, "You need to come in. We need to take care of this and have a surgery to remove it before it spreads across your whole body." And so I had to drop out of the police academy and have this surgery, and luckily they were able to catch it in time and it hadn't spread. But I felt like God was putting roadblocks kind of in the way of becoming a police officer, which was kind of hard at the time. I was like, that was my only goal, my only plan for my life. And then eventually I was like, well, maybe God's got a different plan. And I didn't know what that was for a while, and, did some odds and end jobs for a few years. And before I started volunteering in my church's youth ministry, and I was like, all right, well, I remember I enjoyed youth ministry so much, so why don't I just go back and help out? Maybe there's some sort of skill set that I can use to be able to hang out with these kids. And I found out pretty quickly that I did have a skill set. It was called dodgeball. I just loved playing dodgeball with these middle school boys. I don't know what it was, but it was incredible. But then I actually found out that I loved teaching the Bible and teaching what it meant to be a follower of Jesus to these students. And I remember my first group of seventh grade boys had a small group. It was my first small group that I was leading, and I was like, what am I going to tell these guys? like I'm still learning this stuff myself. Like I feel like I need to be the one that's being taught here. And I remember I had a small group at my house one time, and I invited all the seventh grade boys, and I was like, there's going to be like 2 kids that show up, right? But it turned out there's like 20 guys.
Wow.
20 seventh grade boys showed up at my front door, and I was like, oh, dang, like, what are we going to do? Like, I wasn't even prepared for that. And so we ended up just hanging out, playing some games, and then we dug into the Word, and just, it was such an incredible experience to be able to see that I was able to now be that mentor for these students and kind of look back at my days at how I needed a mentor in my life, and my youth pastor really filled that role for me. And so that's kind of, what my upbringing was. And then I looked into getting into a ministry job. And again, I didn't really have any credentials or background and, theological degrees or anything like that. And so I just put my name out there and said, hey, I'd love to work for any church that will hire me. And I grew up in Colorado, and there was no churches in Colorado that was going to hire me. There wasn't any positions available. And so I found a place in the Central Valley, California, that they decided to take a risk on me and bring me out and run their middle school group. And so, my wife and I, we packed up everything, we moved out there, and man, God really blessed that opportunity. I was kind of working in an inner city church with a bunch of really just poor, I'd say underprivileged kids. Most of them were on food stamps and kind of in and out of juvie, and just a rough situation. But I just found there's this passion that I had for hanging out with these kids and just kind of teaching them what the word says, and just teaching them the gospel. And for many of them, they'd never even heard any of the Bible stories. So I grew up knowing all the Bible stories, but didn't really have a relationship with Jesus. But these kids, they just had, they would hear stories that I would just sit down and I would just read them narratives from the Bible. I just started Adam and Eve and worked my way down and read them narrative, and they were into it. Like they
Did
were
you break
just,
out the puppets?
Oh my goodness. Had I break it? Oh, if I had brought out the puppets, they would have left. Yes. I've been beaten up right there. But no, we, just being able to teach them who God was and to see their interest into diving into faith was pretty powerful for me. So I just loved working in youth ministry. And then eventually after, 5-6 years out there, I moved back to Colorado and became a youth pastor here at Pepsi, Parker EPC here, and did youth ministry here for almost 10 years before I kind of transitioned, kind of moved into a role now where I'm doing outreach and missions. And really God kind of grew my faith even in this new position that I've had for the last 4 or 5 years. But I love being able to partner with our missionaries. Pepsi supports missionaries all around the world, and I get to be able to partner with them and see what they're doing and kind of witness what God is doing all around the world. And then I can bring back those stories to our congregation and help them kind of catch a vision for what God is doing outside of Parker here, which is pretty incredible. And so yeah, I lead mission trips and service projects and things like that locally here. But, I take teams, all across the world just on mission trips, and I get an opportunity to visit some of our missionaries and countries all over. And like I said, I just feel blessed that I just get to be a witness to what God is doing. And it's just, that's where I'm at right now. And people always ask, well, what's next? What are you going to do next? And I'm like, well, this, I hope. Like, I just want to keep doing this. Like, I feel like God has really given me an incredible opportunity. So
that's so cool. And I'm curious, did anybody pay it forward by putting your clothes out in the freezing cold?
10 times over.
Yeah.
Everything, and that's why when yeah, you can imagine after a couple decades of youth ministry, you have some kids that you want to throat punch, right? Like, right. But you gotta hold back. And I just remember the restraint that my youth pastor had, and the amount of times that he could have destroyed me and should have, but didn't, and the impact that made on my life. And so I've kids have done things that have made me not too happy, but I've always tried to show His grace as much as I could.
Sure, take him out on dodgeball instead.
Man, I think that's why I became so good at dodgeball. It's just like you get a bunch of middle schoolers on the floor out there, and that's right.
Yeah.
Headshots count.
That's
like,
right.
There's no rule against headshots.
And now you have your own kid in youth group. So how's that?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids in youth group now. I've got 3 kids, a 10, 12, and 14-year-old. But my 12 and 14-year-old are middle school age right now. And man, that's so awesome to be able to see and hear them just talk about their youth ministry time now. Like even last night, at youth group, my son comes home and I ask him, I was like, do you have a fun time? And he's like, Dad, I always have a fun time at youth group. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to hear, because that's, hopefully, he's grown up in the church. And again, not just hearing stories of the Bible, but really developing a relationship. And so that's why I'm so passionate about who our youth leaders are and what they're doing, and just so appreciative of the time that they've given to pouring into my children. So
cool. So yeah, you're not only a youth pastor in your own home, but you still get to function a lot in youth ministry. I know you support the youth ministry here and everything too, but you've been directing Colorado winter camps for how long now?
I think this was my 10th year.
10th year. Wow.
Yeah, it's been some time.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about how it started. We'll get into the details, what God's been doing and all that stuff in just a bit. But how did it all begin? Because I think you benefited from it, right, when you were in school?
Yeah, like I said, when I was growing up in the church, my church, my local church, went to this winter camp group, joined a bunch of other churches up in Buena Vista at Frontier Ranch, one of the Young Life facilities, for winter camp called Snowbound. And so each year we would go there, and I just remember growing up in these experiences really transformed, you know, who I was. Like I would go to these winter camps and just experience this passion of worshiping Jesus around hundreds of other students. It was a new experience for me because I mean I grew up in a very, you know, very slow, kind of not upbeat church, where there wasn't any excitement. It seems like we all, we sat back and sung hymns and things like that, which isn't bad. Those are good. I'm very formative, for my upbringing, but
Sure.
but I just didn't ever remember a time where people would worship and have smiles on their faces and dance around a little bit and really throw some emotion into it. And so I was just really, really impacted by those times as well. And so I went to these camps growing up, and then I moved away to California for a while and did ministry out there. But when I came back here to Colorado and started working for Pepsi here, our church was going to these winter camp groups, Snowbound for middle school and High Altitude for high school. And I just remember thinking, wow, these were the camps I went to growing up. So this is pretty cool. And so I continued to bring our students to these winter camps, and we went for a few years, and our students really loved it. I loved it. And I remember after a few years in, the guy that was running it at the time kind of came up to me, and he had asked if I wanted to step in and help lead these camps. And at the time I was pretty new to the church here, and I was a growing ministry that I was trying to work and put a lot of effort into it. And so I was just like, not really. I mean, I'm kind of busy, got a lot of other things going. And eventually he was like, well, he's like, I think I'm going to drop out. And so he's like, I don't think anybody's going to lead these camps anymore. So they'll probably just kind of fizzle out. And I was like, well, I don't want that to happen. And so I kind of felt guilted into it almost. So I was like, all right, well, I'll kind of step in, and see what God does. And
Sure.
So I stepped in and kind of helped lead camps that year. And at the time, we just had one weekend of Snowbound and one weekend of High Altitude. And yeah, that first year went great. It was a lot of fun. But I remember it was that next year we had signed up and we were getting all the registrations in. And I had a ton of other churches that they were calling me up and be like, hey, can we join in? And I was like, well, sure. Why not? And so I kept adding church after church until I realized, Young Life Camp Frontier was like, actually, we're out of room. Like you've kind of like, we don't have that many beds here. Yeah. And I was like, ooh, well, that's, I've already said yes to all these, to these churches. And they're like, well, we can give you another weekend. And so I was like, all right. So we started adding weekends each year to this winter camp group. And here we are now, we're at like 6 weekends of camp. Next year, we're looking at having to do 7 weekends because each year God has kind of blessed this ministry and it's kind of grown.
Wow. It's so awesome. And now to be a part of that has been awesome as a youth pastor, to be able to benefit from that. And, I told you earlier that, yeah, it's such a blessing. And I remember the 2 years that we weren't able to have winter camps, one because of COVID, of course, and then the next year because of the water main break.
Yeah.
And I remember having to do my own camp. And it was fun and we had a blast, but the whole time I'm thinking, I can't wait to get back with the rest of the team and do this together again.
Yeah.
It's been such a blessing to me and to the students we've been able to bring. So beyond it expanding, any other changes from the early days to where it is now? Like, is it pretty much resemble the same kind of deal, or?
It actually is. Yeah. I mean, this winter camp group has had, several different people leading it over the years since it was created. I think it started in, probably early 90s, 92, 93, something like that. One of the guys that I work with here, his name's Gary McCusker. He actually led the winter camps, several years ago as well. It's probably been, 15, 20 years, but he had led these winter camps, and the guy that was leading them before him, he actually got him up on the phone the other day and, we called him and he's like, hey, talk to Dan a little bit. He's going to be talking about our winter camp groups. And he's like, how did these start? And so he's kind of sharing, some of the thoughts behind it. And basically he was just saying, a lot of the winter camps back then, they were good, but people would put them on themselves. Like each church would put their own winter camp on, and it was more of a kind of a discipleship camp, which were great, taking your students deeper. But a bunch of youth pastors kind of got together and they were saying, what, we need something that's more of an outreach. We'd love to be able to invite something that kids can invite their friends to, maybe their friends that have never, stepped foot in a church, but they'd come for a weekend and have some fun and learn about who God is. And so that was their original purpose behind it, was to kind of create something for the local church. Just like I said, just a bunch of youth pastors kind of getting together. And I think when it started, there was probably, 4 or 5 guys, leading different churches around Colorado that decided to kind of join up and do this each year. And so, and as I think about like what has changed over the years, I can't think of a lot as far as philosophy goes. Like that's really who we are, is we just want to be an outreach, an opportunity for churches to bring their groups, but also that their students will be able to invite their friends too. And so we love being an opportunity, or a winter camp group for people who have never heard the gospel before, but also for those who have a deep faith in the Lord, but want to grow in their faith and have that discipleship piece. And so we try to do kind of a both and approach. And I think that the churches that we have coming are a great representation of that. I mean, we've got all different denominations. We've got different, just styles of worship that people come from. And, so they're bringing in students. Some are pretty, outreach type of kids, and some are kids that have been following Jesus for years. And we got groups bringing over 100, to 200 kids. We got some groups bringing, 7 or 8 kids. And honestly, that it doesn't really even matter. This group isn't about a particular church. It's about the Big C church coming together. And I think it's just a beautiful thing when it all plays out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. And I told you offline before we started recruiting, I think the rest of us, me included, we get to look good, I think, in our churches and our other ministries because of what this group of youth pastors together would be able to pull off, because it really is the church coming together and unifying as, we're teenage Christians that are here in Colorado. That's our identifying mark.
That's right.
Yeah. And I've heard from a lot of different leaders that I've been able to bring along, like other volunteers, that they come back to me and go, so this isn't a professionally run camp. This is just a bunch of youth pastors around Colorado that pulled this thing off. I'm like, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because we get them all together and we know what we're doing, and just pitching in, and
for sure.
and the sharing the workload is huge. Like that's been a huge benefit to me.
That's really what these camps are. I mean, it's, and I like I say, it's not my full-time job. I got another full-time job, but I'm blessed because I work at a church who allows me to run these winter camps. They actually see it as an outreach, beyond, our 4 walls of our church, and they see it as, okay, this is a Big C church type of ministry where we can reach, thousands of kids, that aren't even a part of our particular church ministry, but like. And so they offer me the ability to be able to give up, a significant amount of time in February and, January, February each year. And so it's pretty cool to be able to be a part of a church that sees the value in that and gives me the opportunities to do that as well. But like I say, as I'm kind of one of the ones that helps put this camp on, these camps aren't about me at all. In fact, I could step away tomorrow and they can throw any other Joe Schmo in here kind of helping lead these groups, because basically it is about a bunch of youth pastors coming together and pulling together and putting on an incredible winter camp experience. I always like to tell people that my spiritual gift is that I can get people who are smarter and more talented and more entertaining than I am into the same room and let God do some pretty incredible things. And awesome. And that's what we've seen.
Yeah, that's so cool. So thinking about this most recent camp, what are some stories? What has God done recently that we can celebrate?
Oh, yeah. I mean, each year is very unique, and just the different groups that we have, it's always a lot of fun. But I love being able to kind of see where where our speakers go each year. We always try to bring in speakers from, around the country, really. But we like to try to kind of pull from people that we know, connections of people that we have, and to be able to have them come in and speak and share the word in incredible ways is pretty powerful. I think, this year in particular, our middle school speaker, Mark, he did a great job. And he spoke all 3 weekends of our snowbound weekend. And we don't normally do like an altar call. We kind of leave it up to, different speaker, whoever wants to kind of end their messages. But he asked students, if this is something you want to commit to, if a relationship with Jesus is something that you feel is missing from your life that you want, just stand up. And over the 3 weekends of camp, we had over 150 middle school students stand up, deciding to make a decision for Jesus. Now I get it. I was a part of camps. I understand that there's those camp high decisions that you make. And so we don't exactly know what those decisions are, but God does. And that's what's really cool is we just know that God put it on their heart to stand. And maybe that's just a seed that is planted in their life. Maybe it's a radical transformation that will happen. Who knows? But God does, and God's going to continue to work and do incredible things in and through that. And so that being able to see that each week was just amazing and something I'll never forget.
Yeah, I know our group didn't have anybody that stood up for that question, but I think we talked a lot about taking our next step of faith a lot those weekends too, and our entire group was ready to do that and step out and be fishers of men. We talked a lot about that as well, and those middle schoolers are still talking about it to this day. Like I was just having a conversation with one of them just this week. And yeah, I remember when the camp speaker said this and this. I'm like, my gosh, this is really taking root. And like, it's not just a weekend thing. You're actually living this out. And it's so cool to see. And I know you said that your church has had several baptisms already and going to have more, all the result of winter camp as well.
Oh yeah, I mean we come back and here's what I like to say. I probably should have said this earlier, but for me, the really kind of emphasis of why I do these camps, why we continue to put these on each year, is not necessarily about the camp weekend. Like the weekend's great. We have incredible times of worship, great fun memories are made, lots of, leader connections. Those are all great things. But really the reason that we do these camps, we put them on each year, is to help build momentum for youth ministries as they move forward. The stories that I think that are the most amazing aren't necessarily the ones that happen at camp. They're the ones that happen when they get back. Whether it's a leader who had a conversation with a student at camp, but comes back and is now, discipling and mentoring that student, or if it's a group. I know I've had several times throughout these last 10 years where I've had churches come up after being at camp and they said, hey, before we went into camp, the camp weekend, our church ministry, our youth ministry was kind of struggling. We'd have some kids coming here and there. There's just no real excitement, but we came back and there was just like fire in our kids. They just loved worshiping and serving, and they wanted to share their faith. They wanted to go deeper in their faith, and they're inviting their friends. Like those are the stories that I'm just like, all right, this is what I want to see continue to move forward is to hear those stories throughout the year and maybe something that just sparked something at winter camp, that just kind of created a fire that continued to grow throughout the year. And so, yeah, for even our church, we came back, a couple weeks after camp and we had 8 students baptized on a Sunday morning, and it was such a powerful service. I mean, we had our students share their testimonies, and people in the congregation were just crying, just tears of what God was doing and transforming these students' lives. And that's what I love to hear. In a couple weeks from now, we're going to have even more students that went to camp baptized and share more stories. But it's not just what's happening at Pepsi. It's I'm hearing these stories from churches all across Colorado, and that's what just fires me up. Like I just love doing that. And so as long as these camps are needed, I'll do what I can to help continue to put them on, because I think God is doing something pretty incredible in and through them. So
that's so cool. Yeah. Well, we definitely appreciate that. Speaking for the youth pastors in Colorado, we very much appreciate it for sure. So one of the most unique parts of this camp really is all the different churches and youth pastors that come together to make this happen. So what's that look like in practice? Let's get in practical and okay, how do you actually organize 50 churches coming together to pull these things off, and what's that look like?
Yeah, man, it's this thing. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called networking.
Maybe.
Yeah, you heard
Maybe.
about
Yeah.
networking? Dude, that's why I appreciate what you do so much, because that's basically all this is. This is a network of youth pastors, and they get together, and my hope is that it's not just about these winter camp weekends, but these youth pastors can connect and network on other things, other events and activities, and even if it's just something that they can get together with their local youth pastor network around their own cities, but that's what's so cool is, but we get together and we try to, we have like 2 or 3 winter camp meetings every year where we have all the youth pastors come, and especially for those that have been around a long time, like these meetings aren't much different. Like they're pretty much the same thing. I mean, if you've been around in a couple of years, you're like, yeah, I know what we're going to talk about. But that's secondary, really, to what the purpose of these meetings are. Is because I think relationally that's kind of the biggest aspect and I think that's why people want to come. I'm one who hates meetings, like especially like if a meeting could be an email, like and I have to sit for hours or I have to drive somewhere and like that just bums me out, man. Like I can't stand meetings, and so I'm hoping that what these meetings are when we get 50 youth pastors, 60 youth pastors in the same room, is it's not about, hey, let's just sit down and like nail out all the details of what we're doing, but like let's share some stories, like how is God working in and through your ministry? How can we be praying for you? How can we do this together, walk side by side? And so that's been pretty incredible, and like I said, it doesn't come without its challenges. I mean, we've got churches of all different denominations, like I say, different styles. I mean, we've had conversations in the past of like, hey, we can't use fog machines, or hey, we do need to use more fog machines, or we shouldn't have so many lights, or we need more lights, or how many times are we going to sing Oceans this year? Or like these questions, like they'll come up every year, and
Sure.
just like any other normal church has these same questions, right? If you have an intergenerational church, different styles, different people, but hopefully that's not a barrier. Like we really try to make these non-essential issues something that's not a barrier for people to being a part of the group. We really want them to feel like they're heard and valued, their input. So like I say, I think when we all kind of get together with the same goal in mind, we want to reach students to know, love, and serve Jesus. And if we could do that, if we have that as our goal and keep that above everything else, and keep our worship of God above everything else, then I think that the rest of the details usually work themselves out.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and I love the fact that this is not just a bunch of youth pastors and churches from one denomination. Yeah, they're coming from all different walks of life, and yeah, there's probably who knows how many different theological opinions in those rooms. Yet we're all there together for the same purpose.
That's
and
right.
Reach teenagers with the gospel.
That's right.
Wow. So then we all come together on a regular basis, and yet we're able to pull off what, like I said, most of our volunteers have said feels very professional. How do you organize all the details with all these? Essentially, they're doing it as volunteers
Yeah.
from their churches. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's just, a foundation of kind of things that we have done for years, right? Even since the beginning, I remember growing up, we're basically running the same camp. It's same kind of structure, what makes it so unique and so amazing is just the different personalities that you bring in, and each church has different resources and availability to kind of help out. And that's what I love about it too, is we'll have some, pretty veteran youth pastors coming in and are like, I put on my own camps. I kind of know what I'm doing. I'd love to help out and be more involved in setting the direction. And I'm like, great. Yeah. Jump aboard. Like, let's have it. But then I've also had some pretty green youth pastors come in. They're like, hey, I've literally had some people who are like, I started last week and now I'm leading this group and it's winter camp. What do I need to do? And basically I'm just like, just hang out with students. Just bring your students, spend some time building relationships with them. The details are covered. We'll make it work. We just need you to really invest in your relationships with the students. And so we have people on both ends and a spectrum of people in between. But it's great, getting the different resources from different churches to kind of pull together to pull off something pretty amazing. So we'll have like a design team, that kind of meets before the year, and kind of we talk through like what is the theme going to be for each year, and what sort of scriptures are we going to go through? Like, what are our students dealing with? Like, what do we need to be focusing on this year? And each year, I think, we have such an incredible team of like I say, different people into the conversation that we really kind of nail down on something that, is holistic for all of our students. Like, no matter where you're at on the end of, like I say, if you don't know who God is, or if you've been following Jesus your whole life, but we really try to have something that's impactful for everybody. And so, like, having that design team is very powerful. But we have other churches that are like, hey, I'm good at like putting on games and stuff. I can lead the activities that we do on Saturday. I can put together the volleyball games and the dodgeball games, or silent disco parties that we do, like things like that. Those are all kind of different activities that we have people jump in and kind of help out and pull different strengths from different churches. So
That's so cool. And that's one of the ways that we've been able to keep the camp relatively affordable as well. I know camps are not getting any cheaper. That's for sure.
Amen. I'll tell you what, one of my philosophies for why I try to keep the camp as cheap as I can is because I remember when I first started youth ministry, I was in California. We were taking a group to summer camp, and it had already been decided where we were going before I even started this job. We were going to Hume Lake, which, if you don't know anything about California, that's a pretty impressive summer camp, but it's also very expensive, super expensive. And so it was like, this is 20 years ago, but it was like $600-700. And I'm like, as a youth pastor for this, church of like mostly inner city kids who living off food stamps, I'm like, yeah, that ain't gonna happen. Like, I remember taking like 12 kids that first year, and I was just like, we have a ministry of over 100, and I can only take 12 of these kids to camp because they couldn't afford it. And so I was like, that next year I just thought, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to put on my own camp. And so, like, we rented a beach camping site, we camped on a beach and we did different events, and I was able to keep the cost under $100. And so that very beginning of my ministry career is that's what I felt like that was something that was, important to me, is to be able to make things affordable for our students. And so the temptation has been with these winter camps is to raise the prices each year. We have to raise a little bit just to kind of keep up with our Young Life facility, right, to be able to match their prices, because we have to pay Young Life. But we try to keep our costs down as much as we can, and we could raise our prices. In fact, every year I always get a bunch of different people coming and saying, hey, if we just charge $3 or $4 more, we could get this, or if we charge $5 more, we could do this. If we charge $2 more, we could do that. And it's just like I get like 20 different people saying this. Is like, if I just said yes to everything, this would be a $700 camp for a weekend experience. And so we try to put on the most excellent camps that we can on a budget that we believe is honoring to the youth pastor who's trying to get these kids to be able to sign up and to afford being able to bring them to a weekend camp. So that's always been a challenge, but something that we've always been very passionate about trying to be able to do.
Yeah. And very grateful for your church, who's been able to really be a huge help in all that, to be able to kind of, funnel everything through
That's
your
right.
church, which is, it seems like, with you and other people that have led camps, they really believe in what happens at these camps.
Oh, that's right. I've always felt the support from our leadership here at our church at Pepsi here is, like I say, they see this as an opportunity to impact more than just what's happening in our four walls, the students that come through here. And so they'll continue to support that each year, which is awesome. There's not many churches that will allow one of their staff members to work a kind of parachurch opportunity and still pay them to do that for several months. And so it's been an incredible blessing to be a part of this church. So
That's so cool. So Dan, what would you say to youth pastors out there who are maybe listening to this and they're like, wow, that sounds awesome, I want to collaborate in my area and do something similar? What would you say to them?
I'd say do it. Absolutely. Here's the thing is, like, I believe collaborating with other youth pastors, other churches, is something every church should do. If anything else, it'll, and it doesn't mean that you have to do like winter camps. It could be anything. It could be a worship night. It could be a mission trip. It could be whatever event, summer camps. I would highly recommend every church to step out of, like I said, step out of their four walls, right? I think sometimes churches kind of get into their own brand a lot. They're like, hey, and I don't want to kind of get into it. I don't want, everybody has the different ways of doing it, but it's just like, this is our brand of church, and we're going to continue to do things the way that our brand and then shows. And so then you got students who grow up with that brand of church, and then they graduate and then they head off to college or they go somewhere else and they're like, wait, I can't find that same brand. Where's that at? And so they don't know what it's like to partner with the Big C church.
Yeah.
They've never seen or been a part of what's happening in the Big C church. And so that's always my encouragement for churches and youth pastors is find a way every year to expose your students to what's happening in the Big C church.
That's so good. And when do you want the legacy of Colorado Winter Camps to be? Like beyond you, when you finally hand it off to whoever's next, what do you want that legacy to be?
Oh man, I would love for it to continue to do what it set out to do 30, 40 years ago, is really just be a bunch of youth pastors getting together, creating an outreach opportunity for churches to bring students to come to know and love Jesus. That will help, like I say, propel and give their individual ministries just a boost for the rest of the year. That's what I love about doing these things at the beginning of every year. January, February, is hopefully it'll give some momentum to each church throughout the year. And so that's really what I want the legacy to be. It's like I say, it's not about a brand thing. This Colorado Winter Camp, whatever, call it whatever you want. Yeah. Snowbound High Altitude. It's just a weekend experience that hopefully sets up just a year-long opportunity for students to really grow in their faith and to know and to have their lives transformed by Jesus. And if it's something that youth pastors can count on and can rely on, and to be like, hey, every year I know that I'm going to be able to have a coalition of other churches to work with, to put on a weekend, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of them. It's going to take a lot of time and energy that they're going to have to put to putting on their own thing. I would love to be able to see that continue to grow. This isn't something that is unique to Colorado. We talked about this before, like we don't have some like special secret of what we're doing that, only we can make this happen. Like literally any state in our country could do this. If you have a few youth pastors that get together, you got to have a place to do it. You find a Young Life camp, find somewhere where you can gather, 300, 400, 500, 600 kids and just talk to other churches and say, hey, do you want to do this together? Let's rent this out. Let's rent this place out, and let's find somebody to come and speak for the weekend. Let's find a band that can come in and play, lead our students in worship, and let's plan some games and some activities. Like anybody could do that. It's not a special thing to be able to. That's a youth pastor. I basically just described a youth pastor, and that's what they do. And so to be able to do it together with other youth pastors, you'll put on something amazing. And so that's my hope, is that it continues to grow. But like I say, not just here in Colorado, but really anywhere.
Well, Dan, I know people are going to want to probably, follow up and say, okay, how do I do this in my own area or whatever? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and maybe ask you follow-up questions or connect with you more?
Yeah, I mean, they can, reach me either here at my church at Parker EPC, or you can log into our website. It's just coloradowintercamps.com. That's where we have people register for camps, and we're about ready to open up our registration for the 2026 season, which is kind of funny to think about. I mean, we just finished, the 2025 season. People have a whole year long of ministry that they're thinking about. And so usually the last thing on their mind right now is, what am I doing for winter camp next year?
Yeah.
But we try to get those signups as early as we can so that we can begin to prepare for the next year. And so that'd probably be the best way. But yeah, I just encourage anyone that, like I say, most people that join our winter camp group, it's not because of like an email that I randomly send out. You're very unique in that way, Steve. Most of the time it is word of mouth, like youth pastors talking to each other, in a network. They're meeting together, once a month or whatever, and they're like, oh, hey, what are you guys doing this winter? Oh, we go to this place called Colorado Winter Camps, and we partner with all these other churches, and those churches are like, oh, well, how do we get on it? It's pretty simple.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. Just go ahead and register and come talk to us. Luckily, we've never had to turn a group down because we've just been adding, weekends each year. And so until we run out of winter camp weekends, weekends in winter, then I think we'll continue to add as many as we have. In fact, we have people coming up all the time. And so when are you going to start, Colorado summer camps. And like, I'm just like, well, I mean, Pepsi's very gracious for letting me do this during winter. I think I might be pushing it a little much if I ask them to be able to do it in the summer as well. Plus, that we don't have the Young Life facilities that we do, because Young Life books out their facilities throughout the summer. So, but it's an incredible opportunity, and would love to connect and talk with anybody that has any questions.
That's so cool. Yeah, I just what you were saying. One of the guys in my local network was saying this last month, and he's like, "Hey, like, I think I may be joining you guys in that winter camp thing moving forward," because he keeps hearing us talk about it, and he's like, "I've been looking for something like that." I'm like, "Yeah, you should definitely join us."
Well, that's great.
So before we wrap up, I just want to give you an opportunity to just speak whatever's on your mind, whatever's on your heart to the youth pastors that are out there listening, maybe from your many years in youth ministry and from winter camps and being a dad of kids in youth group. What's got laying on your heart that you want to share with the audience?
Man, I always tell our youth pastors when we gather together, I tell them, like, you guys are my heroes. Like, and because like I said, I've done it. I know what it's about to be a youth pastor, and you guys sacrifice so much, and you give of so much, and you get you don't get very much in return. There's not a lot of, youth pastor appreciation days. I don't even know. Maybe that is the thing, but if it is, I haven't heard about it. But youth pastors out there that are working day in, day out, just loving students, being there for them, like, know that you guys are making a difference, and not just any difference, but an eternal impact. Like you're changing the course of these students' lives, and that's pretty incredible to think about. Is like I always look back at kind of how we started with the youth pastor that impacted my life, and to think how each and every one of our youth pastors, a part of our group, youth pastors all across our state, all across our country, all across our world, each of them they're doing something of eternal impact, and it's going to have a great reward. And so I'm just so excited to be able to now be a champion of these youth pastors. And so hopefully that's what I'd really love to be able to see continue in this next chapter of my life, is as I'm not in the trenches anymore doing the youth ministry, I get to kind of sit from the side and kind of watch it happen, which is incredible. But I hope that I can be someone that can just be an encouragement for those that are continuing the good fight and continuing to work with these students. And so yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the youth pastors that are devoting so much of who they are to these students.
And thank you, Dan, for all your years of ministry, and thank you for what you've done here in Colorado and with Colorado winter camps, and for inviting me through a random email one day. And
absolutely,
it's now turned into us getting to benefit from that and a growing friendship. And there's so much that you've done. And so thank you for all that, and just pray that God continues to bless your ministry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for having me on.
I also want to thank you for being here once again. And if you want to connect more with Dan, be sure to check out the podcast show notes. And if this episode was helpful for you, please consider leaving the positive review on your favorite podcast app, and also share this with someone else who you think would enjoy hearing it. And if you want to go beyond that and begin supporting my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries, I would love to have you join my prayer or my financial partnership teams. Just head over to nnym.org/Steve Cullum, or just follow the links in the show notes. I'm hoping to see some of you at the Orange Conference 2025 at the end of April. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, you can go either in person or online, and I can save you $25 off your ticket if you use the promo code STEVE25 at checkout, or you can also follow the link in the show notes. And if you're going to the Orange Conference 2025, please be sure to reach out to me, because National Network of Youth Ministries is planning a fun and free networking opportunity over a great barbecue dinner for youth leaders who are there. So be sure to reach out to me right away. As I look to the rest of the year, we've got some great episodes coming your way, so make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. But until next time, be sure to stay connected, and may God bless your ministry.